Hey everybody, Zeniff here. I wanted to talk about how to improve your game as a raider in World of Warcraft. Specifically, this is going to be focused on people that are melee classes or classes that have to stand next to the boss. So I've got a video here of just a recording I just did of doing a looking for raid in Battle for Dazar'alor. This is on the boss called Opulence. Um, Looking for raid is it's the lowest tier of raiding, the lowest difficulty of raiding. It's the easiest one, but just for purposes of showing you guys and talking about a couple points, I wanted to record this. So if we're looking at the fight, typically when a fight starts, you want to have a pull timer. When you're getting into more detailed raiding, this doesn't always happen in looking for raid. People aren't really coordinated as well as they are in higher raids, but this group did do a pull timer. So what are the things you want to think about during your pull timer? Well, you want to optimize your damage to be the most you can at the very beginning of the fight, typically. And so you want to think about things like potions, battle potions. You want to make sure that you have your flasks supplied. You want to make sure you have your food buffs up. So when you eat certain food, it gives you extra stats. You know, the one I have, it gives me haste. You kind of look at what is your best stat that you want to have, and you can eat that kind of food. Flasks will give an increased amount of, for me, agility as a demon hunter that lasts for an hour to 2 hours, depending on what profession you use. And then battle potions. So we'll get to the countdown timer goes
5.
and as we get close to the
3,
1 second mark,
2.
I'm starting with using some of my pre-abilities that I have as a demon hunter, and then using a battle potion right before we start combat with the boss. And what that does is allows me to use a second battle potion while we're actually fighting the boss, versus if I use the battle potion after we started fighting, you only get one battle potion per fight. So you can kind of squeeze in a little bit more damage if you use one right before you pull a boss on a fight.
1.
So as you dive in, you want to look at using all of your major cooldowns that optimize the most damage, usually in the very beginning of a fight, unless your raid leader tells you to do otherwise, or if the fight is specific that you know you have to wait a little bit of time to use it.
Beware.
Another factor that you want to consider when you're fighting a boss, most of the time you want to be standing behind the boss if you can. Obviously this isn't the case for all bosses, but most you do. And the reason you want to do that, either behind or to the side of the boss, is because it decreases the amount of damage you can do. Now how does it do that? The boss has the potential to parry or to block different attacks that you do on the boss, which would make you do 0 damage or low damage, and that's not what you want when you're fighting. You want to be able to maximize the most damage you can. So standing in a position that's behind the boss is also beneficial. So another thing to think about, we can see here the healer has placed a giant circle. This is a shaman's healing rain ability, I believe. So he's placed a healing circle. That's something that you should really kind of try to keep in mind as a melee DPS, is when healers place these big circles, they can't just constantly place them every second, or they're wasting a lot of mana, they're wasting a lot of time. They've placed them positionally for a reason. And so let's say you were fighting the boss and you decided, if you're a ranged DPS, you wanted to go stand in this corner. Well, you're not getting any healing benefit. Now, this might be a requirement for you to stand in that corner. It might be something you need to do. But in most cases, try and position yourself. Maybe you could stand right here, right on the edge of that, so you're getting those little bit of extra heals if you need them. As a melee DPS, kind of pay attention. If there's a circle and it's like ends right here on the edge of where melee is, stand right in that edge of that circle and get that little bit of extra healing. The healers are going to love it. You're going to love it. You'll stay alive more, and it'll help you. So continuing on, I'm going to jump straight ahead towards the end of the fight and talk about something multi-target. I want to talk about multi-target fighting. So when you're in a raid and there are multiple targets, so we'll say right now there's only one, but at one point he spawns. So here we go. So we see here the boss just spawned all these extra, you can see their health bars, all these extra enemies. So this is where you're going to want to use moves. You can see all these numbers going out from my character. Moves that will do the most damage to the most characters as possible. It's going to do 2 things. One, it's going to kill those enemies faster, which is what you want in this. You don't want them to stay alive for too long. And then it's going to also increase the amount of damage you do. in terms of you're hitting more enemies, so you're doing more damage overall. So what you want to pay attention to is when those are going to spawn. Make sure you've got your abilities ready. So right now I've got an I beam that's just 1 second away from being able to be cast. So I had it all ready for when these guys spawned, positioned myself in a way that I could hit them all, and then I cast my I beam and I'm hitting all these different enemies, which is doing damage to everything. So you really want to optimize cooldowns for when you can do damage. Now, don't hold off a cooldown for too long. Say if it's a 30-second cooldown and you've waited 2 minutes to use it, that's just too long. You could be using it in between before those ads spawn. But optimize your damage for the amount of enemies that there are. Make sure you're using abilities that are going to hit multiple targets to be able to kill more targets and increase the amount of damage you're doing. This will help you with the boss fight. And those are really some of the tips and tricks. Obviously, there's going to be things like don't stand in fire. Pay attention to when a boss is going to cast an ability. So if we look back at this boss, you can see he's getting ready to cast Flames of Punishment. This is Deadly Boss Mods. Gives me these timers. Talks about when they're going to cast these abilities. And you can see when he's going to cast it, which means when he casts that, it's going to shoot flames out of the front of him. And you'll learn the different abilities of different bosses. But pay attention when those timers are going to hit and position yourself accordingly so you don't take damage that you don't need. Again, a big message from Deadly Boss Mods. Hey, he's casting this. Dodge it. Make sure you're not standing in the way.
Yeah.
You can hear it says beware. You know, it tells me to pay attention to what's happening. So I stand behind the boss. He begins casting it, but his health went down far enough that he had to move to the next room. But you saw he shot some flames out the front. He'll spin around shooting flames. So just learn what the boss's abilities are and preemptively position. Positioning is a huge thing in terms of damage. Position your character so that you won't get hit by those abilities and you don't have to worry about, dying from those abilities, which affects your damage more than anything. When you're dead, you do 0, so that's not going to help. So hopefully some of those little tips and tricks were beneficial, and good luck.